Hello there, welcome to Talking Europe on France 24, brought to you today from the European Parliament in Brussels. Now, there's a good chance that you're not watching this show right now on a traditional TV, but like millions of people, you're getting your daily news on a computer, a tablet or a smartphone. Our shift to a digital life has brought new opportunities, but also new challenges. Recent cyber attacks have raised fears of a new age of cyber wars. Meanwhile, fake news has become an everyday phrase, accused of not just spreading misinformation, but swaying elections, stoking populism, changing the course of history. Well, we're going to be picking through the facts and the fakes and asking what Europe's role in it all might be with some rather expert guests. I'd like to introduce them right now. With me from Estonia, MEP and former Foreign Minister Urmas Paet. Thank you very much for being with us.
Hello.
Hi there. From Slovenia, we have a former journalist and now MEP, Tanja Fajon. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And from Poland, we're joined by MEP Michal Boni, who used to be your country's Minister of Digitization.
Yes.
Excellent. So we'll be coming to you for all the technical questions.
Okay.
Well, if we look at the sort of cyber attacks that I've been talking about, there have been some really big ones in the last 12 months. In the UK, there was WannaCry ransomware that meant that several hospitals were crippled and couldn't carry out operations. The CDU party in Germany said that it had thousands of attacks in the run-up to its election on its website. If I come to you first, Michal Boni, how big a threat do you think these sort of cyber attacks are?
You know, the threats are growing. The economic value of cybercrime is just about 450 billion US dollars per year. So we need to start with some actions. And of course, we need cooperation, we need certification, and we need public information. It's clear, last year when some attacks were done, and this year after Spectre, ENISA, European agency responsible for those issues, presented some kind of vocabulary and guidance how we need to tackle those problems.
Tanja Fajon, do you think that we do understand enough about these attacks and threats?
No, I don't think that the general public understands enough, but we are witnessing growing cyber attacks. It's an amazing economic impact. It can also destabilize the countries, cause wars, make destruction in the companies and in business. So it's certainly something we have to combat. That's why also the European Commission recently, I think, established the Agency for Cyber, how to combat cyber attacks. We have to increase cooperation, security, awareness also, to be able on the country level, on the national level, together with some European harmonization of rules also to tackle this, I think, very growing and dangerous phenomena.
And Urmas Paet, I know that your country is particularly seen as forward-looking on all things digital, hosted a digital summit at the tail end of last year. Now, the European Commission says that in some member states, 50% of crime is cyber crime. Do you see that figure growing across Europe?
Clearly, it's growing, and it's not anymore only the problem for private businesses, for example, which suffered under cyber attacks already years and years and quite massively. But it's more and more also cyber defense issue, because there is no more, how to say, classical conflict also between the states or between different actors without also cyber attacks and cyber war, so that it's already there. And that's why I see that it is absolute must for Europe, European Union and NATO together also to be much more prepared for massive cyber attacks and also cyber war, because we all understand that successful and massive cyber attack may cause huge damage and also take lives.
All right, well, your country, as I said, is seen as being a bit further ahead on this than some other EU member states. We have a report actually from our correspondent Anne Maillet, who's been to find out a bit more.
Tallinn's town centre is medieval, but digitally, it's the most modern capital in the world. Since Estonia achieved independence, it's been a high-tech leader. Now, every citizen has an electronic ID card, which does more than just say who they are.
This is the main page, the gateway or the gate to e-state. If an Estonian needs to use a service from the government, the first idea should be, okay, I'll find the computer, I'll type in eesti.ee and get to this page.
You can pay taxes, vote, or found a company. Everything's done online. The paperwork is gone. In 2007, Estonia was the first nation to be targeted by a cyber attack, which it blamed on Russia. Since then, online security is a priority, and the country has created digital embassies abroad.
Let's say something from the heaven falls on that database and it cannot be run temporarily. Then we can switch that same database on in another location, and that other location is not inside of Estonia, but outside of Estonia.
Estonia has such a head start that NATO has set up an operations center for cybersecurity here. The address is a secret, but every year the members of this Center for Excellence take part in rigorous exercises.
They have a whole war game scenario set up where they have to detect certain weaknesses in their system. And of course, after a few hours or days, they see the first attacks.
The center includes 17 NATO members, as well as Austria, Sweden, and Finland. As it's located in a former Soviet republic, this operations center is highly strategic because cyber attacks from Moscow are increasing.
The fact that the center is here is a means of dissuasion, of course. But it's clear that we also have to have capacity and credibility.
Since 2016, NATO has considered cyberspace a military zone, just like the sea, land, and air.
There we go, NATO considering cyberspace a battle zone. Michal Boni, we've heard that Estonia there is quite ahead on these things. How much catching up do you think the rest of the EU has to do?
You know, my dream is to follow Estonia and make Estonia all over the European Union. But I'm talking about digital solutions, and I think it's very important coordination and harmonization, because when we are talking about Estonian experience, it's not only cybersecurity, it's of course digitalization of administration, the possibility of using e-health solutions, e-identity, of course. So we need to combine all those issues, and this is the only way. But I think that what is important to raise the problem of awareness of cybersecurity, and we need to start with education. We need to start with children. We need to start with us as individuals, because our behavior is very important. This is some kind of hygiene, cybersecurity hygiene, and we need to teach people.
Indeed, well, that's something, Tanya Fayon, you were talking about before, the awareness. There's also the issue of skills. It's not overnight, is it, that people can gain skills in cybersecurity? I don't know, perhaps if we come back to you, Mr. Payed, we were talking there about Estonia starting to address this in 2009. We're now 9 years down the line. Can Europe catch up quickly enough?
Well, it depends very much which is also the political will and political willingness of the country. It goes to education, but it also goes to cybersecurity.
Well, should it be a question for the member states then, or should it be something that the Commission starts to impose?
Both. It should go hand in hand, and plus also in European case also NATO, when we speak about cyber defense and cybersecurity. Today's reality is that in Europe approximately, I guess, we're lacking around 100,000 or 150,000 experts on cybersecurity, and it is a very fast-growing problem. So that we simply also need the people who are able to combat cybercrimes, who are able to combat all the problems related to cyber attacks and cybersecurity. So that, but in final end, it depends very much on the understanding of European governments and top politicians.
Well, yes, Jean-Claude Juncker speaking about this recently, saying that there were more than 4,000 ransomware attacks per day, and the Commission, as we've said, proposing this new cybersecurity agency throughout the European Union. So we'll have to see what 2018 brings on that front. If we move on to a related issue, that of fake news, it's become very much an everyday term, hasn't it? Some people liking to tweet about fake news. I don't know if you can think of anyone in particular. We actually follow fake news quite closely on France 24. And just to get us into the subject, we've been looking at one particularly unsavoury item of fake news that's been doing the rounds recently. Its title means that I'm obliged to say something I never thought I might say on the television. The EU is not trying to legalise bestiality. Take a look.
A brothel for zoophiles to open in Denmark? This is the wild rumour that started circulating on websites across Eastern Europe last fall. The news is entirely fake, of course. It was actually picked up from a French parody website, secretnews.fr, which clearly proclaims its lack of seriousness. But despite the disclaimer, the hoax is taken up by news sites and discussion groups in Russia, Georgia and Belarus. So how did this fake news come about? Well, as often, it is based on a debate that did take place, but which ended in the opposite direction. Zoophilia was indeed addressed when Denmark formally decided to prohibit this practice back in 2015, concluding that it is related to animal abuse. But the Russian language media are not the only ones to be attracted by these kinds of headlines. In October, it was the British tabloid, the Daily Mirror, which ran a story about a brothel for zoophiles opening up in Serbia this time. Like the Eastern European websites, the news story is not backed up by any evidence. But it does, however, fit into a broader narrative which has become popular in some Eurosceptic corners of Britain and Russia. That of a European society plagued by moral decay, where debates about gay and lesbian rights are often mixed up with paedophilia and zoophilia.
So there we go, one example of a fake news. Tanya Fayon, you're a former journalist, as I mentioned before. Now, we've seen with that story, it's a story that came from actually truth, but was flipped 180 and then disseminated as something perhaps to try and damage the reputation of Denmark, of the European Union. We've seen that fake news is very prevalent now. It's accused of all sorts of things, destabilising elections, the Brexit referendum. Could we say, though, that perhaps EU institutions, politicians, governments might be guilty of stoking fake news by not being transparent enough themselves? You've seen it from both sides.
No, I wouldn't say so. Fake news is not something really new. What is new is this challenge today of digital era. It's spreading much faster than it used to spread, and everyone actually can write and access it. So what is, I think, very important, and we are trying also in the European Parliament have these discussions, to somehow, on one hand, ensure the professional journalism. So journalists are also threatened with the traditional media, so they have to establish some sort of fact-finding, attack, fight back, fake news, ensure the credibility and professional journalism. On the other hand, it's very important awareness, media literacy, how much we are educating young kids, because they don't differentiate so easy what is lie and actually fight these lies. Politicians, media, journalists, it's our responsibility, because people very easy with the emotions just take what they get.
Of course, it has really become part of our culture now. Michel Bonny, you were talking about education before. Of course, it's an idea that many people have had, talking about media literacy for children and so on. But again, how much is that something that can come from the European Union, from the institutions? Or how much is that going to be seen as interfering in member state issues?
And, you know, I think that we all should feel responsibility for those issues. So it means that at the national level, of course, we need to find some solutions. And of course, it is very important to create a good background for cooperation between us as users, all public institutions and platforms and the digital providers, yes, because they also should feel stronger responsibility for those issues. I don't want to have censorship. It's clear. I don't want to say that all the responsibilities should be put on the side of platforms. But on the other hand, they should react much more clear and much more fastly, especially when it is clear that we are talking about illegal content. Yeah? So it's...
Well, indeed, newspapers, other publishers, there are laws that govern what they can publish and they can be sanctioned. Journalists can even be sent to jail for defamation. Mr. Payet, if I come back to you, do you think that new legislation is likely from the European Union, perhaps concerning Facebook and Twitter really being seen as publishers like any other publisher?
Well, I think that, yeah, there might be some changes in legislation as well, because all what's going on in online actually should be legally on the same basis as offline, so that today's, well, life is not only how to say, outside Facebook and other electronic sources, but also there. But I think that still the main issue is the professionalism also of journalists, sources. Which are the sources? So that here actually nothing basically changed. Of course, the pressure is higher, but the basics is there, sources. You cannot trust whatever piece of information you get. And I guess Europe also has to be a bit less naive than so far, what concerns also fake news and organized spread of disinformation and fake news.
But if I can add something, because it's not so easy to recognize false sources, yes? And I think that the speed of the functioning of those fake news, the misinformation done by some government, as Russia, for example. So I think that we need to consider what kind of legislation we need. On the other hand, what kind of cooperation is needed to make those issues much more clear.
And special attention to propaganda channels, which actually are obvious.
Of course.
All right, and this is surely going to be a subject of much discussion, not just in 2018, but far beyond, I'm sure. Thank you all so much for coming in to speak to us on France 24 about cybersecurity and fake news. My guest, Michal Boni from Poland, Tanya Fajon from Slovenia, and Urmas Payet from Estonia. Thank you all very much. Thank you for watching as well, and we'll see you shortly for more Talking Europe here on France 24.